Good evening. My name is Mrs. Gemma Parrish. I am the Head of Careers and Outreach Lead at Shrewsbury High School. Welcome to this evening's event, Women Mean Business, National Security and Defence. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping, please. Could you please keep your camera and microphone switched off at all times? We are going to record the event, so if you don't want to be involved, dip out, but you won't come up on the screen at all, so that should be fine. Could I ask, please, for the students that have joined us, please could you put the name of your school into the chat function? It's part of our returns for outreach for us to be able to show how many schools we've managed to reach with tonight. I'd like to ask a question at any point during the event. If you could please pop it in the chat, and then once all the presenters have finished their presentations, then we'll open it up to a Q&A and Miss Sharrock will ask people to contribute. So with no further ado, I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Miss Sharrock.
Thank you, Mrs. Parrish. Good evening, everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Jo Sharrock, Head of Shrewsbury High School GDST. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 7th of our Women Mean Business events. If you've not attended before, a bit of background. The purpose of our Women Mean Business talks is to raise aspiration and to empower girls to head out into the world with confidence and ambition. So over the course of these talks, we've been bringing you women who mean business from all sorts of different careers, disciplines and businesses to share with you their insights, their expertise and their experience. So as Mrs. Parrish has already mentioned, tonight's talk focuses on women in national security and defence, and we are honoured to be hosting a truly impressive and accomplished panel this evening. We welcome tonight 5 brilliant women, each of them highly successful in their chosen field, and I have to say we feel very privileged that they've given of their time this evening. Their time is precious indeed, but they have given of it tonight to share their experiences and their wisdom. So for those young women who join us, who aspire perhaps to a career in the defence or security business, this is the most fantastic opportunity to hear from women living that experience. And I think what strikes me as I look at our lineup is the different paths actually that these women have been able to choose within the broader context of defence and security. So I'm really looking forward to hearing their individual stories. Before I welcome them individually, can I also welcome our audience? We're delighted by being online that we can reach an audience, far beyond Shropshire and our own school. But I would just like to welcome our own students from Shrewsbury High and also those from our sister schools from across our national GDST family. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. So the way this normally works is I will welcome each of our guests in turn. Welcome to all of you. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. And we'll hear from each in turn. And then if we can save up all of our questions to the end, we'll have a sort of panel discussion when everybody's shared with us their individual experiences. I'm not expecting any technical issues, but if there are any, just bear with us. We have a really good team behind the scenes and they'll get us back on track if anything should go awry. But to business, enough from me. I'd like to start by welcoming Wing Commander Helena Ramsden, who joins us from RAF Cosford. Now, for those who don't know, RAF Cosford forms a major part of the Defence College of Technical Training and sits really, I suppose, at the centre of the RAF's mission to deliver technical training that meets the needs of the UK Armed Forces. Now, Wing Commander Ramsden is the commanding officer of No. 1 Radio School, and that's part of the Defence School of Communication and Information Systems. Its mission, and I hope I'm right in saying this, is to train engineering officers and other ranks so that they can enable cyberspace capabilities for the RAF and wider defence. And I'm told also that Wing Commander Ramsden has been involved in a number of innovation projects across the RAF. So welcome, Wing Commander. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. And I will hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Ms. Sharrock, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I I'd like to start, if I may, firstly by congratulating you on such a fantastic programme. It's a real privilege to be involved and to take part. And I hope that it has been successful and will continue to be successful in inspiring women to make choices. Yes, as you just explained, I'm Wing Commander Helena Ramsden, and I'm currently serving as Officer Commanding No. 1 Radio School at RAF Cosford. But I'd like to take you on a bit of a journey through my career to date, and hopefully for some of you there will be some similarities there and some themes that you might want to pick up on in the Q&A. So to start off with, I grew up in North London. And whilst I was going through my secondary education, my focus really did land on aviation. It had a real appeal to me, and for those reasons, I ended up in the RAF Museum at Hendon, where I found a leaflet advertising the Air Cadets. Now, at the time, I went to a girls' school, and there wasn't anybody else that was involved in the Air Cadets or anything with a military theme for that matter. Having found the leaflet and realised I could get myself there, I was absolutely hooked. The ethos of the military, the Air Cadets gave, that camaraderie and the opportunities that it provided gave me a real lift throughout my secondary school years, and something that provided a real complement to the academic work that I was doing. And for those reasons and reasons of wanting to join the Air Force, I pursued primarily STEM subjects, going through my A-levels and into my degree. And whilst I was doing my degree, which was in mechanical engineering at Reading University, I was also wonderfully supported there as a member of the University Air Squadron, where again I was able to make links and connections that have lasted me throughout my career. But also got me on a really good footing in terms of understanding what the Air Force is about in terms of its output, but also in terms, as I say, of its sense of purpose and its ethos. On completion of my mechanical engineering degree, I applied to join the Air Force, and I accepted a place to become an aerospace systems engineer. I went through my initial officer training and then through to my professional training on aircraft systems. But due to twists and turns of fate, I ended up having opportunities in cyberspace engineering put in front of me. Now, this isn't an area which I'd previously considered, but the opportunities there were significant, and the opportunities to take on quite a significant degree of responsibility at a fairly young age were really appealing to me. So I carried out some additional training to become a cyberspace engineer. The result of that was that my first tour was absolutely fascinating, and it fulfilled every ambition that I'd had so early in my career of joining the RAF. I became a flight commander on Tactical Communications Wing, which meant that I was in charge of a group of 50 personnel, providing communication system support to frontline operations in Afghanistan and beyond. It really did fulfill what I hoped to achieve within the Air Force in that very first tour. It gave me a huge sense of responsibility, a huge sense of empowerment, and really developed me in terms of my leadership ability and my exposure to a vast range of different engineering challenges and problems in providing those operationally focused capabilities. So having achieved that high, I then came back and thought, well, I really do want to carry on finding out what it might have been like on the aerospace side of things. And as a result, I ended up doing a software support role with the Typhoon platform, which at the time was fairly new at RAF Coningsby. That was fascinating, working with a number of different international partners to develop Typhoon software capabilities. And for those of you that are familiar with the platform, you'll be aware that it is one of our more heavily software dependent aircraft systems. That role was followed by a tour in Air Command headquarters, where in a communications engineering capacity, my role was to look across all of the information networks and systems that were deployed in support of operations in Afghanistan, and understand how they were being used and how they might be better engineered to push information around the battle space more effectively. Again, a fascinating role which got me out and about, engaging with a number of different stations, a number of different platforms, and really developing my understanding within my first few years in the Air Force of how information systems come together and how they can be best exploited to get information to the right person at the right time. That experience gave me an ideal platform to lean further into an area which has really piqued my interest in recent years, which is information support to the intelligence environment. And I progressed to work within intelligence support, both at the strategic and at the tactical levels. The Air Force has a number of platforms that carries out tactical reconnaissance, and I was providing the communication support for those systems. That was followed by a number of joint headquarters roles, which focused on how we communicate across a coalition and the different systems that have to come together to pass information effectively between coalition partners. And also in roles that looked at how we provide communication support to the vast number of different global operations that the UK supports around the world. So I was finding myself getting a huge amount of career satisfaction, a lot of stretch at a very early age. And that was supported in the military with an educational journey that took me through the RAF's professional development programme, teaching you, supporting you in the development of your staff skills, your leadership skills, and your understanding of military context. I also decided, however, that having done a mechanical engineering degree, but ending up going down a communications focused route, that it would be great to have that academic background to what I was actually doing in my primary role. And so I applied to the Air Force for an executive master's position on a course called Information Capability Management. I was able to study that part-time over a period of 4 years, and was supported fantastically by various line managers, in fact, in being able to take time out to go and to study all those different subjects which spanned software, databases, defensive cyber, information knowledge management, project management, and also my dissertation. So I felt like the practical experience that I had was really well supported by that academic experience. And if I may just say that, having done a first degree and a master's degree, the vocational experience that I had to bring to that master's course made the experience really richly rewarding, and I'd advocate through life education to anybody. I was also interested during the course about how much we push the synergy of people, process and technology in the information world. And increasingly, as my career's progressed, it's been the people and the process element of it that has become the increasing focus. And I'll come on to that again in a little bit. I managed to complete my dissertation 10 days ahead of the birth of my first child, William, in September 2015. And I'm eternally grateful to my dissertation supervisor for making the point that I wouldn't want to be carrying out that activity during my maternity leave. I'm going to bring this out because as somebody who joined the military, motherhood wasn't something that was particularly on my radar at the outset of my career. And I have to say, it's something that I completely underestimated, both in terms of the physical and the emotional demands that new parents are placed under. I made a short list of what I thought was a pretty unambitious list of things to achieve during my 9 months maternity leave. But I found that I got through very few of them. One of the things I did manage to complete, however, was my application to become a chartered engineer, for which I had to sit an interview with a panel from the Institute of Engineering and Technology and tried to convince them of my professional competence. which was no small ask at the time, given that my life had revolved around nappies and baby groups for the past 6 months. But it did help me keep in touch with my professional cadre at work, with my colleagues, and put me in a really good position to pick up my career from where I'd left off when I returned to the workplace. So my takeaway from that is how my focus and my values had to evolve at that time in my life, but how I felt very supported in making that transition within the military environment. After the birth of my second son, I was selected to attend the Defence Academy of the United Kingdom to get a deeper grounding in defence, international relations and strategic and operational level planning. And that's a course called the Advanced Command and Staff course. Through that course, I got to complete a postgraduate diploma in defence studies with a dissertation into Russian hybrid warfare, particularly in terms of what happened through the invasion of Crimea in 2014 and their influence over the 2016 US presidential election. And that was fascinating in terms of the insights it provided me away from that sort of specific field of engineering, but obviously with today's current context has provided me with a much richer background of understanding of what's going on and the dynamics behind it than perhaps I might otherwise have had. On finishing Advanced Command and Staff course, I took an appointment in Air Capability Strategy and found myself plunged into an area that I didn't imagine I would have gotten into, which was working with the wind industry to look at how we overcome the challenges of the development of offshore wind farm developments for air defence and the effect that it has on air defence radar. That was a fascinating project to be involved with. I very much enjoyed working with our industry counterparts to set up a task force to look at how we overcome those challenges in order to support not only the defence of the UK, but also the green and low carbon agenda. Finishing in Air Strategy, Air Command Capability Strategy, I was then posted as commander of number 1 radio school, which is where I am today. It's been an absolutely fascinating and really rewarding 15 months, seeing firsthand how we train and develop our engineers and technicians of tomorrow in a field of technology which is evolving at a phenomenal rate. And what I say to the students as they come through the doors, or what I'll say today, is that the education that we impart is great for the near term, but actually the things that we want to really deliver are the skills and attitudes that will enable people to pursue that through life learning, particularly in fields where the context is changing and the technology is changing at such a phenomenal pace. And the people that we have coming through the doors, the students we have coming through the doors, are truly inspiring, and I'm sure we'll be able to achieve that to a fantastic degree. So to sum up, there's a famous quote which I love, which says, choose a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I think that's a great aspiration, and I think through my career that's something that I've most days been able to achieve, and I commend it to you. Very happy to take any questions at the end, but I hope that's been useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Incredibly inspirational. What an exciting career. Can't wait to dig into some of that at the end when we get to questions. But thank you very much, and for starting off the evening in such style. I'm pleased now to introduce Brigadier Sarah Sharkey, Army Advocate for Women in STEM. Sarah is a trained research scientist. She spent 30 years in the British Army, rising to the post of brigadier, and was the most senior technical female leader in the Army when she retired. But retired is in inverted commas, so I don't think she's really retired. A wealth of experience to share with us tonight. Welcome, Brigadier. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Ms. Sharrock, thank you very much. I'm not quite sure where the research bit comes from. That's news to me, but we'll
Okay.
we'll come around. We'll maybe come around to that. So I am a retired brigadier, but when you retire from the army at brigadier rank, actually at colonel rank and above, you're allowed to keep it as part of your. But you have to put retired in brackets after it, just to make everyone really clear. However, I now work for Deloitte. Deloitte's one of the largest management consultancies in the world, with a sort of huge presence in the UK. But in Deloitte, I'm still working in defence. So I run our digital defence account within Deloitte. It's effectively trying to deliver services, support services back into defence. I'm kind of doing a very similar job to the one I was doing in the army when I finished, just on the other side of the fence. So quite often I say I've swapped Deloitte for offence because the D hasn't changed, and I do confuse myself. So it's fascinating actually listening to Helena, because her career journey is reasonably similar to mine. I had 2 girls, not 2 boys, a bit later than she did. I'm also a chartered engineer. I've also spent my entire career as very much on that STEM technical front. In fact, the story I want to tell you is a story about maths, about the importance of role models, and perhaps who some of those were in my life, but also about the fact that you don't need to decide today what you're going to do tomorrow, because I think it will probably resonate with a number of the speakers, is the career you start out thinking you're going to do is probably not the one you're going to do for your whole life. And also, I think some of the jobs of tomorrow haven't been invented yet. And certainly if you looked back 20 years or even 30 years when I started my career, AI was science fiction. You know, we didn't have software in the way we did today. And actually, you know, just to really date myself, when I was your age, mobile phones didn't exist. The internet didn't really exist in a way that was accessible. So yeah, the game changing over the decades. Again, talking about that pace of technology change, which I just heard about, is just phenomenal. So what you need to do is preparing yourself for the future world of work, not today's world of work, because life and the world of work could be very different. But I also think that offers massive opportunity, and also also kind of mindset to take control of how you want to work and what makes you happy at different times in your life. So just going back to that theme of the power of maths. So when I was doing my A-levels, I did maths, physics and chemistry. I was born in Luton. I went to my local comprehensive school. I wasn't doing very well with my maths. In fact, I had an absolutely disastrous mock exam, and I decided I was going to give it up and I was going to go and do geography instead. My father said, "Yeah, Sarah, you can do that, but you're not going to live here." I was 17. I didn't really have a lot of choice. So after slamming out the door and storming up the hill and then walking back down again, I carried on doing maths. And thank goodness I did. Because for me, maths has been a lifesaver more than once in terms of my career and that ability to really evidence your skill set and your knowledge and your ability. Because if you've got a maths A-level, and I ended up getting an A, goodness how, it gives you that real confidence that you can do that. But also it was just about practice and confidence and self-confidence. So my dad was very much ahead of his time. He's now in his 90s. He did not see a difference between me and my brother in terms of what we might do, what we might achieve. So we were grilled as much at the kitchen sink, doing times tables. He obviously had a real bent towards science, technology, maths. He saw that as being the future. He could kind of see the technology revolution coming. He was an engineer himself, but he was a draftsman for Vauxhall. And he had come through the School of Hard Knocks, so he had to leave school at 14. He then, having grown up during the Second World War as a child, he had to do an apprenticeship in his own time. He then had to take a big chunk out of his education to go and do his national service. So he had to fight really hard to get an education, so hard. So he valued education and knowledge really, really highly, so determined. So he, for me, has always been a real advocate and a real role model, and a real kind of proponent for equality, really, really ahead of his time. In other ways, not so much, but certainly in that way. My mother, on the other hand, was more of an anti-pattern for me. And it was more to do with her expectations had been set so low by her own father that she then didn't achieve her potential at all. So my mum was a secretary. In those days, there weren't PAs or EAs or executive anything, so they were secretaries. And she spent her entire life helping normally men be much more efficient and effective at their jobs. I think she was quite frustrated in her career, and now when she looks back, she has regrets that she wasn't able to take the advantage and take the opportunities that she could. And I think if you put into context when I was growing up, so between the ages of 11 and 22, we had a female prime minister for that whole period, Margaret Thatcher. So for me, and clearly the Queen was sat on the throne for all that period. So in terms of what females can achieve and what role models look like, the sky was the limit. So I grew up not thinking there were barriers and not having that kind of whole kind of mindset of what I can achieve. I saw what happened to my mum and knew that I didn't want that to happen to me. So kind of context there is do maths, but also learn from your parents, value your parents, and understand where what their lessons were and how that shaped them. I say this now as a mother of a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old who don't think I know anything, but I would, just listen to their stories, listen to what shaped them, and see where their opportunities were, where their frustrations were. But all that context then created my mindset. I did a chemistry degree. I was going to be the next Marie Curie. I loved chemistry. I was fascinated. So clearly I joined the army instead of going to do chemistry. And I think that again talks to one of my themes is, it's okay to pivot. It's not a failure to realise that that's where you thought you were going and finding yourself staring at test tubes changing colour in a lab for 8 hours a day perhaps isn't what you want to be doing, and there might be something different or more challenging and more exciting. So I joined the army for 3 years, thinking I would do 3 years until I decided what I wanted to do when I grew up. To be 30 years to work that out, but even then, in that 3-year expectation is that most women were only offered a short service commission, and that was because if you got pregnant at the time when I joined back in the early 90s, you had to leave. You weren't allowed to serve if you were pregnant, and it wasn't that far before you were allowed to serve being married, let alone pregnant. So it's contextual, as to where we are today. So my expectations were fairly low. I'd join the army, have a bit of fun, and boy did I. So certainly in that first 3 years, learned to ski. I played so much hockey. I climbed all sorts of mountains, did a huge amount of travel across the world, as well as having the privilege of commanding soldiers, both on operations. So my very first job, commanding 30 soldiers, all men, with an electronic warfare regiment out in Germany. And that privilege of commanding and leading and being responsible at a really young age, that empowerment at a really young age was amazing. So I'm not going to go through a potted history of all my jobs. Suffice to say, most of my friends didn't bother writing my address down in an address book. They would just rub it out with a pencil, because I think I had over 32 addresses in 30 years. So moving around, seeing different parts of the country, living overseas, meeting so many different people, so many different nationalities, having friends all over the world now, and having experiences that money just can't buy. But throughout that, my theme, that maths theme, meant I had really strong technical credentials, became a chartered engineer, and took jobs where they were technology first. So I've done jobs where I had to procure equipment. I've built software houses. I've built cloud services for defence. I was part of the recce that went out in '94 to recce in Sarajevo before NATO forces went in to do the communications recce and work out where all our communications assets were going to go. I was commander comms, responsible for all the communications in Baghdad, the senior military representative in Baghdad. I also did quite a lot around our surveillance assets. So one of my favourite stories is I baked some cameras in an oven. We were decommissioning some surveillance cameras from Northern Ireland. There was demand for force protection measures in Afghanistan, and so one of the options was to move these cameras from Northern Ireland, where it's very wet and very soggy, to Afghanistan, where it's very hot and very sunny. So we needed to test to see whether they would be able to survive the conditions. And just being able to have that ability to solutionize and understand the context and to make a difference, I've always found to be incredibly rewarding. So, I talked about the opportunities in there, about that importance of maths. In fact, Helena talked about going to the Advanced Staff College. I managed to get selected for that part because I had a maths A-level and they needed people that could do the masters of science. So again, maths was hugely important. And so what did I learn from that? I think the opportunities aren't always the ones you think they're going to be. So don't close yourself down too early, and then keep that breath, keep that looking, keep that what's my interest. Yeah, what can I do differently? How can I be open to these decisions? I think you've also got to be proactive. You've got to take a risk, and then you've got to be sanguine if those risks don't necessarily succeed at that time. You've still learned. So even if you fail, you've learned. So don't be scared of taking those risks and moving that forward. I think the technology aspect is really powerful. There's phrases like software is eating the world. Almost everything we do now is underpinned by software. And I think that's going to become more and more prevalent in the future. So if you understand technology, it doesn't matter if you're going to be working in finance, in retail, in almost any profession really. So some of the biggest employers of software engineers at the moment are people like Goldman Sachs, our banks, because they build their own software. They want that trust, they want that capability. So that technology underpinning, if you've got technology skills, you'll enhance your employability in any sector. I now meet quite a few chief information officers of large corporations. When I quiz them about their careers and backgrounds, very few have come up the technology route. And that's partly because still the number of women in technology jobs is still hovering around 17%. It's really quite depressing. So they've come up a different career stream and then moved across into the CIO role. So that, again, that ability to cross-platform into different roles, I think is really important. And I know you will all be super users of your mobile phones. You'll be able to operate those inside out. You'll be programming your grandmother's Sky machine. You're really super users of technology. But take a step back sometimes and think, do I understand how this technology works? And just be a little bit more curious is the one thing I would maybe ask of you when you're considering how you build that career. The other thing I just wanted to almost finish on is thinking about employment is not necessarily one job. And I think particularly in the future world of work, where there is an envisaging that automation and AI might replace a lot of the kind of more sort of routine process type jobs that exist today, which should allow more time for leisure or other activities. And so remain open to thinking that the future world of work, and the army offered a massive opportunity to do this whilst in the army. So charity work, volunteering, getting involved in sport, going adventure training, doing things, in the army, it was always, I think, same in the other services, having a secondary duty was always really important as your primary job. And that might be helping organise events, it might be running a network. There's a whole bunch of other secondary duties you can do. And that's really satisfying because you're able to, just have different experiences and build your knowledge and build your credibility. It might also be writing a book. It might be caring for parents, children, dogs. They're all work. They're just a different type of work. So sometimes thinking about work as a job isn't necessarily the only way of thinking. You can think about work being different things. Ultimately, though, it's a balance between your happiness and your work-life balance, but also economics will come into this. How much you will need to work, what that looks like in relativity. But I would say, try and make sure you're getting the right things to motivate you. I think Helena made a brilliant point about, if you enjoy your job, you'll never work a day in your life because you enjoy what you're doing and it doesn't feel like work. And I think, the qualities and the keys around that are your own personal, to motivate you. Are you empowered in what you do? Can you make decisions? Are you able to make suggestions and improve the way things are done? Do you have access to the right training? Do you have the right skill set? And then is there a purpose in what you're doing? And that purpose thing for me comes right back to the army. The job in the army gave me huge purpose because it was all to do with the national defence, either looking after soldiers, in order for them to deliver military effect. And it's interesting, having made the transition out of the army now into the private sector, I do miss a bit of purpose. I try to refine that by working in the public sector and trying to use my expertise to help support defence more broadly. And it's about that purpose, which then needs to resonate with your own values. So I think it's really important as you think about the world of work, is to think about what values are important to you. And the Army values are integrity, courage, respect for others, selfless commitment, loyalty, and discipline. I should know them off by heart, but you can see I just had to quickly just check. And I think if you can settle on a number of values, and for me, integrity is one of the highest, settle on those values and just make sure the work you are doing really, really resonates with those. And for me, the Army career, 3 years turned to 30 because they resonated over and over again. Thank you.
Brilliant. Sarah, thank you so much. That was so inspiring, such valuable lessons and words of wisdom. I really look forward to bringing you back at the end for questions. I'm sure there will be lots of them. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So I'd like now to introduce Mrs. Helen Holbrook. Helen is Principal Cybersecurity Assessor with Defence Digital, Ministry of Defence. And I hope I'm right in saying that she leads a team of cybersecurity assessors who provide independent assessment and advisory services across the whole of Defence Digital. She is also, I'm told, a diversity and inclusion ambassador. So Helen, welcome to you. Helen with us? Oh, Mrs. Parish, is Helen with us? Do you know on the call, or have we lost her?
She is there. Whether she's got a problem, I don't know.
Helen, are you able to unmute, Helen? Can you let us know in the chat if you're with us? Otherwise, we can move on and come back to you. Okay, well, we're struggling to get hold of Helen at the moment, so we'll move on. I'm hoping that Eve Lambert is with us. Eve, are you here with us?
Good evening, Jan. Yes, I'm here, and
lovely.
I'm communicating with Helen as we speak, and I just don't think that she can communicate clearly with you.
Oh, what a shame.
Yeah, but she can hear you. We can't hear her, so I'm not sure why that might be.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, we'll see if we can resolve that behind the scenes. But Eve, if you're happy for me to introduce you, Assistant Head of Operations with Defence Digital. So I'm guessing maybe you work quite closely with Helen. And that you're a member of the Cyber Defence and Risk Senior Leadership Team and responsible for, amongst many other things, recruitment in young talent. So the girls on the call should pay heed. But welcome, Eve. I will hand the floor over to you to continue.
Thank you very much, Joanne, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. And I'm passionate about education, girls' education, women's education, and through life learning. So this is a huge opportunity, and I thank you for it. So first of all, a little bit about me. What Sarah was saying really resonated with me. I grew up near Crewe in Cheshire. I grew up in a family whose parents never really achieved their true potential. Mother had to leave school to look after the family when her father died. Although she was in grammar school, she never achieved her true potential, and ended up in secretarial work throughout her life, but aspired to be an accountant. My father was an engineer, went through an engineering apprentice. So I was the first person in the family actually to go to university. And I started life at a grammar school, a selective grammar school in my hometown. I was always interested in sciences and followed chemistry, biology, and interestingly, listening to Sarah, maths and physics were not my strong point, and I did end up giving up maths and physics and chose geography as a third A-level choice, which somewhat limited my university choices in STEM subjects at the time, but went on to study the university in Liverpool. I studied biology. After university, I was offered a PhD, having done a really interesting dissertation, which I had published, and And I regret this to this day. I actually didn't want to stay in Liverpool. I didn't want to carry on studying at that point, and I turned down the offer of the PhD and left. I'm not sure where that would have taken me, but I didn't really fancy at the time studying verticillium wilt disease in tomatoes. It really didn't float my boat, and ended up working for what was then the Ministry of Agriculture and now DEFRA. My major subjects were crop protection and ecology, and so I worked for DEFRA as my first role, and it was a really interesting role. I was doing experimental trials with new chemicals on crops and doing the analysis, the effect analysis on fungicides and herbicides. So why have I ended up working in cybersecurity in a cybersecurity organization? Well, life takes many twists and turns, and I became a single parent and very quickly realized what I was doing was not sustainable. It was long hours. It meant that at the time, and we're going back quite a long period of time now, that sort of career did not really lend itself to being a mother, being a parent. So I packed myself up, went back to university, did a higher degree in order to be able to teach. So I ended up teaching at university, and that I taught for 10 years. I taught reproductive physiology, anatomy and physiology, and I really enjoyed my time teaching. It was great fun. I was involved in education. I was helping young people achieve their career aspirations. But again, life circumstances intervened. During the time I was teaching, I married a serviceman, an RAF officer, and of course, as Sarah has already intimated, and that involves a lifestyle which involves an awful lot of moving around. And at that time, I'd got 2 children, and I thought this is entirely unsustainable because I could never guarantee I could get a teaching role wherever we were posted. And my challenge there was, do I keep the family together? Do I stay in one place? I chose to keep the family together and move. So these are those life options, life choices that will face most women, I would think, during the course of their careers. And I think picking up on Sarah's theme of flexibility and openness, and the fact that in this day and age, you may have one career and a career anchor, but that does not necessarily mean that is your career anchor through life. You're working for an awful long time. I mean, I'm coming up for retirement now. I'm almost retirement age, but I've had over 40 years worth of working life, and in that time, I've continued to develop, to study, to reinvent myself in a way, and to be adaptable in order to manage the challenges of a family life and a career, because I've always been ambitious, I've always enjoyed my work, and I've always been curious. And so in that situation, I joined Ministry of Defence, and I joined Ministry of Defence in a security role. I was really lucky that I had a whole series of line managers who were really interested in advancing my career. And so I was on a career pathway whereby I then took professional qualifications in that role, firstly in communications and information technology, and latterly in cyber risk management. So and even now, at this age, I am still doing higher qualifications in cyber risk management. And this helps me keep abreast of new developments, and in my role in terms of resourcing, recruitment, talent acquisition, really understanding the roles that we offer, that Defence offers, and being able to pitch those roles to get the right people that we need into our organisation. So as you can see, you know, I'm a huge believer in lifelong learning. Even now I'm upskilling and training. I've had quite a number of really inspirational women in my life. And the things that I've learned is that to be successful, you need to be clear-sighted. You need to be pragmatic, innovative, curious, challenging, not necessarily accept it as gospel when people say, well, I don't think you can do that, or should you be doing that, or can you balance all those things? I think you know what you can and can't manage. You know what you can and can't balance. You know, life is a question of juggling. But I think what Sarah said about, you know, going to work and it not being a job, but, you know, enjoying your work is the most important thing. If you're not enjoying your work, you know, you shouldn't be doing it. Find something you really enjoy, because, you know, you're a long time at work. You know, you could be at work for 45 years. You have to enjoy what you're doing. I absolutely love the job that I have now. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what I do, and I won't bore you with detail, but I work for an organisation called Cyber Defence and Risk. So what effectively does that do? I mean, we look at across the whole of MOD, in the Army environment, the land environment, the Navy, the sea environment, the Air Force, the air environment, space, and the cyber environment. Our lives are intrinsically shaped by electronic technology. You know, we've referred already to phones, watches, cars, Internet of Things are all dependent on technology. And all electronic technology carries cybersecurity vulnerabilities, cybersecurity risks. We all hear about phishing attacks, DDoS attacks, ransomware attacks. And can you imagine what that means for defence? All our aircraft, our ships, our submarines, our satellites, our IT systems, our industrial control systems, these are all heavily vested in technology, in cyber technology. That is a huge playground for our adversaries across the world, whether or not they're trying to disrupt our military capability, or whether they're trying to steal our technology secrets, our capability secrets. So, you know, there's a whole world of career out there, understanding our risks, our risk mitigations, intelligence gathering, threat analysis, managing incidents. So, you know, for me, this is exciting, it's relevant, it is at the cutting edge of what's important. You know, it's protecting our nation from our adversaries. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and that's what makes me, at the age of 64, carrying on studying, learning, and making a contribution to cybersecurity in MOD. So I hope that's been interesting. It's been a complete whistle-stop tour of me and what I do, but I hope that inspires and generates some questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Eve. I am sure that it will. That was incredibly inspiring, and what a brilliant reason to get out of bed in the morning. And may I say, I feel very grateful that people like you do get out of bed in the morning and look after us all. So I'm really looking forward to coming back to hearing more from you at the end. And thank you so much for stepping in. I am hopeful that Helen may now be with us.
I'm back. I'm back. I had to leave the meeting and rejoin, so apologies.
Oh, that's okay.
So I could hear you, but I just couldn't. Couldn't connect. So thank you again. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. You know, this is so inspiring, and you know what? We didn't have things like this when I was at school, and I really wish we did, because I think, you know, we would perhaps have, I would have been perhaps more advanced had I had opportunities and things like that. But so I kind of took a slightly different path than those on the call, because I left school at 18 following A levels, so I also went to a grammar school like Eve in Harrogate, which is in North Yorkshire, for those of you that don't know. But I joined the civil service at 18 because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. It wasn't necessarily then the norm for school leavers to go straight to university. It was more of you were either very, very bright or you were from a very privileged background. And I was kind of neither of those things. So do you know what my dad sort of said? You know what, you just go and get a job. It'll probably be very safe, you know, go and get an office job in the civil service. And so that's kind of what I did. But actually, I'm really glad that I did, because I met some really interesting people. I had opportunity within 2 to 3 years of being in the civil service. I saw an opportunity for an overseas role. So this was working for NATO. And I was quite inspired by the thought. I thought, well, I'll give it a whirl, and you know, let's take the opportunity. And lo and behold, within about 6 months, I was on my way to Munich, and I was scared. I was leaving home for the first time, but you know what? It was such an amazing experience. And I guess it was probably my university of life, because I didn't actually go to university straight from A levels. So I was working with international partners on the Tornado project. So I was looking after the Tornado Modification Board. So I was working with Italians and Germans, processing all of the modifications for the aircraft, which was very inspiring. I traveled a lot in Europe. I was invited to lots of kind of international events through work, and I just thoroughly enjoyed my time. And I think that kind of gave me a bit more of a yearn for where am I going to go? I really want to get you know, developing myself. And so I did 3 years there, which was my original tour. Then I was given another year, and then a further year, and then that was the end of the line. They were kind of, that was the end of my sort of tour overseas, and I was going to go home to the UK. Luckily, I had a choice of where I was going to be posted, and I chose the Southwest. So that was an interesting area for me, because places like the Abbey Wood organisation had long since stood up, and there was lots going on outside of London as well. I chose then to go down the path of moving into IT. And so I took some aptitude tests, and lo and behold, I passed, and I fell into that. I joined the Ship Support Agency, and lo and behold, they put me on this excellent program of professional IT courses. So I was up and down the M4 to London, to Learning Tree, and undertook, I don't know, probably 6 courses a year over a few years. But I think the brilliant thing about that was I was able to professionalize myself, but I was also learning whilst I was on the job. So it kind of worked hand in hand. So I had the practical experience whilst I was kind of learning, and I was networking, meeting people. After a few years, I decided to branch out, and I actually took some time outside of the civil service, because I decided I wanted a little bit more kind of industry experience. So I spent around 5 years in the banking sector, which was also really interesting, and gave me a different perspective on how the civil service works, because it's much more driven by profit and, you know, how the private industry works, whereas in the civil service we're accountable to the taxpayer and the Public Accounts Committee. And so it was just a very different environment, but it still gave me a really good and interesting perspective. I really started to get interested in the security side of things. And that's where I kind of took my my sort of cyber security path. But actually, I I ended up leaving the Bank of Ireland, which was the organisation I worked for at the time, to join a new startup company. Sadly, the startup company had its finance house in the World Trade Towers, and the funding company went with the World Trade Towers, and so did our startup company. So at that point, I decided, because I'd got married, I had a family, I then decided I would probably take my career back into defence. And actually, it was a refreshing change again. The upskilling, the mentoring, the opportunities were just fantastic. Like the first speaker, the wing commander, I ended up taking a postgraduate certificate in cyber defence and information assurance at the Defence Academy, which was a fantastic opportunity. Whilst again continuing to work, I was learning. I was looking at lots of different modules on threat and risk. It was during the period of the Olympics. And part of the opportunities was to travel into London and go into Canary Wharf and see the Cyber Operations Centre for the operations for the Olympics, which was just amazing. Seeing the attacks daily and how they dealt with them, it just kind of opened my eyes to so many different aspects of cyber. And I think that's one thing that's worth kind of touching on, that actually in cyber, there's so many different roles, you know, that can span from, as Eve kind of covered, the different aspects of information technology that span every particular domain you can think of. Cyber is in each of those domains. And obviously what you don't necessarily need to be absolutely technical. So it can span, you know, right down to the vulnerability analysis and the penetration testing to the risk analysis and risk management side of things. So it's a really broad career. Take opportunity is one thing that I would say. And actually, now organizations like NCSC, you know, they have so many different programs running to inspire people into cyber, especially the girls' side of things. You know, you've probably heard of Cyber First, which is an NCSC program to inspire girls into cyber. They work with a lot of local companies, certainly in the Southwest, such as Rolls-Royce and Deloitte and others, to support things like after-school clubs and Cyber Empower, which is something that's just been running at the moment. And I've been to one of those before, which was just amazing. There was about 200 girls in a big sports hall that were programming little drones to fly around. They were opening, cracking algorithms to open boxes to find a box of chocolates inside. And the companies that work with the schools is just fantastic. So I would kind of inspire any kids to try and get involved with any of these programs if you're really interested in a career in cyber. And also the schools can get involved, for example, in the Cyber Schools Hub. So you can become a school that is very closely linked with NCSC and the cyber program that they run, to become a cyber school hub, which is just amazing, because it resonates with some of the things that the women have already been saying today. Is that actually when I started out, cyber wasn't even a thing. You know, as Sarah said, we didn't have phones. I think I was 28 before I saw my first personal computer, and that was like a wow. Whereas now the opportunities are there. Take them, grab them, use them, and just keep learning and keep developing yourself. And that's kind of what I've always done. And I think if you've got that sort of mindset, then the opportunities are out there. And yeah, I've also, like Eve, had some really inspiring women that I've worked with in my time. And our current 2-star, who's the head of our organisation, is a very inspiring woman in cyber. And she's always pushing us, isn't she, Eve, to get involved with things like this. I mean, it was Christine that kind of inspired us to get involved with this, which is just great. So yeah, I think that's probably all I've got to say now. So I will welcome some questions later. And great, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Helen. I'm so glad that we got it working so that we could hear from you. Absolutely fantastic. Now we have last but far from least, I'm delighted to welcome Chief Constable Pippa Mills of West Mercia Police. Pippa, I hope I'm right here with my biography, but you began your policing career in 1996. As a superintendent, you were part of the command teams for the royal wedding of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, and the role of Bronze Reserves during the London Olympics. And you became Chief Constable in September of 2021. And it says here, passionate about the development of others, which I guess we can see from your willingness to join us tonight. And the outside of work, you enjoy spending time with your sons, your 3 dogs, and pursuing hobbies that include travel and cycling. So Pippa, welcome, and please do tell us about your experiences.
Joanne, thank you so much. And I was very conscious that I would be the 5th of 5 speakers, so I did share a slide just with some pictures on, so I'm not sure if we got access to that. But it's absolutely fab to be here in such esteemed company this evening. I'm really grateful for the opportunity. So you can see there's some pictures, and I'll just draw attention to those. So I'm not originally from the area, so I went to school in Essex, so I am a very proud Essex girl. And unlike most of the other speakers tonight, a very humanities background, so English, history, art with art history, A-levels. So quite generic set of subjects, as you'll see there. But first in my family to go to university, and went to the University of Kent and had an English and history degree. During Freshers' Week at university, with my new best friends, stumbled across the University of London Officer Training course, so the OTC Freshers stand, and something that I'd never thought about before going to university, but ended up joining the Officer Training Corps in London. Which is effectively almost like the Territorial Army, but for undergraduates, with a view to people joining the Royal Army and going to Sandhurst. And during my 3 years at university, really benefited from the leadership training, the teamwork, all the adventure training experience I got there. So I definitely recommend thinking about what you do when you get to university alongside your study. So I was all set for a career in the military, went through regular commissions board to get to Sandhurst. But then in my 3rd year at university, I had a real change of mindset, because at the time, as one of our earlier speaker referenced, it was very different for females in the military. And despite going through all exactly the same training for a year as Sandhurst as the guys would have done, the range of roles available to females at the time was very different, no operational deployments. And I'm really pleased to say it's changed since then. So found myself thinking, what can I do for a career? And my dad was a police officer. And he always said to me that he'd laughed every single day at work. So I thought that sounds okay. And I've always wanted to sort of make a difference and help people. So I thought I'd join the police while I decided what I wanted to do for a job. Thought about the graduate entry scheme, decided against it for a variety of reasons. So joined on a regular entry route through well, everyone joins as a constable, but not as a graduate entrant. So did 18 weeks at training school in Hendon. 25 years ago, and you can see there the photo on the left-hand side is 25 years ago, very fresh-faced Pippa passing out of Hendon Training School. Posted to central London, to Paddington, and really benefited from being posted to such a busy place, and really fortunate to be placed on a really proactive team who had an incredible work ethic. So right from the start of my service, I've always been really proactive, looking for opportunities to do something different. Quite a culture shock, I think, joining the police. I remember going to arrest my first shoplifter, and security guard saying, I caught her putting the steak in the bag, and then she left the store making no attempt to pay. And the shoplifter said, she said, oh no, it's a mistake. It was this and that. And I was like, well, clearly it's a misunderstanding. We should let her go on her way. And I remember my colleague who was with me just like looking at me, thinking young and naive. So you soon still change your mindset somewhat, not to become cynical, but to listen to the evidence in front of you. But had a great first 5 years of service at Paddington, response policing, responding to 999 calls, went into CID, so some investigative stuff, some public order, and all the riot gear, getting petrol bombed, a little bit of undercover work, and exciting things like that. So I've been identified as high potential by this stage. I'd already passed my sergeant's exam, which is the first stage of promotion in the police, and was in final stages of getting onto the high potential scheme when left basically on a career break for 3 years as I have my 2 sons. And then, as Eve described, found myself as a single parent, and so came back to policing, which is something that I wouldn't thought I would have done when I started my career break. So came back, got promoted straight away to sergeant, got selected onto the high potential scheme, and there are 9 ranks in the police, and you'll be delighted to tell you that I'm not going to talk you through every single one of those, but just pull out some key highlights. So mainly operational in East London, busy places like Hackney and Tottenham. But one of the key things, and just to talk about somebody who's really made a difference in my career and inspired me, as a chief inspector in Hackney, had a phone call one day from Dame Lynn Owens, who's the ex-Director General of the National Crime Agency. She's now the Deputy Commissioner in the Metropolitan Police, and a phone call from Lynn inviting me to be her staff officer. And that 12 months just gave me incredible organisational insight, but not just into how the organisation ran, but also Lynn's work ethic, her consistency, and just, Sarah spoke earlier about secondary duties and those things that you do alongside your day job. And I'd always been keen on public order. And Lynn really encouraged me to do that, even though it was very much mainly, 95% male at the time in terms of senior public order commanders in the Met. And she said to me, you have to be in it to change it. And she was absolutely right. So you can see there the second photo, as a superintendent, formed part of the command team for the 2012 London Olympics, deploying 2,500 cops every single day across London to deal with crime issues, but as a reserve in case anything happened at any of the Olympic venues. So incredible experiences through that. As a chief superintendent, I got promoted and was put in charge of the Met Command and Control, which is effectively the call centre. So if you dial 999 or 101 in the Met, all the calls go through to one of the 3 call centres. So I found myself in charge of a call centre. Having joined to arrest people, you're in charge of a call centre. So 5 million calls a year, 24/7, 365. It's £100 million a year part of the business, 2.4 thousand staff. But in that 3 years that I did that role, I really learnt business skills, which have stood me in really good stead as I've progressed through my career. At that stage, I passed the 3-day National Assessment Centre to qualify to go on to a 3-month strategic command course, which is effectively the course that qualifies you to become a chief officer. Incredible organisation, the Metropolitan Police, scale and volume like nowhere else, 50,000 people in the organisation. But I'd always realised at chief officer level, I'd want to step outside and experience something different to the Met. So transferred to my home force, to Essex Police, as an assistant chief constable, and experience the challenge of policing where you live, and the benefit of having an organisation where people live and are policing, where their families are, where their kids are going to school, and just a really different approach to policing than was in the Met. So promoted to deputy chief constable, and you can see the middle photo there. On the 23rd of October 2019, I had a call at 5:30 in the morning telling me that 39 Vietnamese nationals had been found dead in the back of a lorry in Essex. And so one of my proudest achievements in my career is leading the multi-agency response to that for the first 3 weeks. The side effects of that, trending worldwide on Twitter, which my sons found very impressive. I'm getting phone calls from friends in New York, friends on cruises in the middle of the Mediterranean saying, we've just seen you on TV. But the incredible privilege of being able to lead that response to bring justice to some of the families of the victims. At this point, there was a real opportunity because my youngest son went to university as well, and so I was no longer geographically constrained to one area, needing to stay in Essex. So looked slightly further afield and found West Mercia. So obviously the force that covers Worcestershire, Shropshire and Herefordshire. And so I moved to Worcestershire from Essex in September last year. As Chief Constable, so you see, being very proudly there on my first day. It's a great organisation, 4,500 people, £265 million a year budget, and the 4th biggest force area in the UK. It's an incredible opportunity. It's an incredible privilege to lead the organisation. And I suppose I'd describe the difference between being a Deputy Chief Constable, where you're the Chief Operating Officer, whereas as the Chief Constable, you're the Chief Exec. And so, you know, setting the strategy for the organisation and then making sure everyone else can be empowered to deliver it. Couldn't resist there a photo. So having been encouraged by Lynn Owens to get more involved in public order, very proud to have been the national lead for protest. And I'm now the national lead for police dogs. So you can see their trainee police dog Voss, 8 weeks old, West Mercia Police's latest recruit. So just to summarise, really, I suppose policing's changed significantly over my 25 years service. So we look now, we see a 24/7 news cycle. Social media's changed. You know, everywhere my cops go, every interaction they have a mobile phone in their face, which absolutely transparency and accountability, but just increases the challenge. Crime has changed significantly. Complexity of crime. Why would you burgle somebody's house when you can hack into their computer and steal all their details online? And, you know, thinking even the most simple investigations have got a significant digital element to them now. There's different entry routes than there were when I joined. So, you know, uniform policing isn't for everyone. So you can join to become a detective, be a detective within a year. We have degree holders entry programs. Police Now, which is a little bit like Teach First, which people are more familiar with, but also a multitude of police staff roles. So not officer roles, but actually police staff roles in any arena you can think of. So I suppose looking back, I joined Pete to help people to make a difference. And I still think I do that, but in a slightly different way by enabling the amazing 4,500 people in my organisation to do that. And true to my dad's prediction, I have laughed every single day at work, but obviously that's so far because I've still got quite a bit left to go in my career. So Joanne, that's it from me. Thank you.
Oh, Pippa, thank you. Absolutely fantastic. Again, I mean, it just, if I can invite all of our brilliant speakers to perhaps put their cameras on if they're happy to, it would be nice to have everybody on screen and unmuted if you're able to. But yeah, truly inspirational from everybody. So can I perhaps now invite people to start posting their questions into the chat? I think hopefully we'll manage to get most people up on the screen. And Gemma, if we could enable Wing Commander Ramsden's mic and camera, that she doesn't seem to be able to turn that on at the minute. Sarah as well, Millie, you're there. So to our guests, if you would like to post any questions that you have in the chat, please do so, and we will try and get through as many of them as we possibly can. But can I just start by saying thank you to all of you. An incredible evening, incredibly inspiring. What comes across really strongly is how much you all love what you do, and yet I would say what you do is probably considered to be among the most stressful jobs in the world. And a lot of people might be put off by that. So I think it's been really refreshing to hear how much you love what you do and how excited you are. I wonder if you could share how you have managed what must be a very stressful job in such a way that allows you still to take daily joy from it. And I don't know who would like to cut. Maybe Pippa, why don't you kick us off with that one? I loved the idea of you laughing every day.
I find I've resolved. I find meaning in work. So I find that you know, lots of friends at work, and you know, having that common purpose, that shared purpose to what you're doing, really goes a long way. And I think as you, the reason you go through a range of roles as you become more senior in an organisation is because you get used to holding more risk and managing, and so your ability to manage complex risk increases as you develop through your career. And so I think if you plunge somebody in at this level, they just wouldn't sleep at night. Whereas, I'm comfortable that we don't get things right all the time. Sometimes in policing, people die because that's the nature of the business we're in. But my job is to put systems and processes in place to improve things consistently and give that consistent service to the public and to victims of crime. So I suppose that finding meaning in what you're doing is the most important thing. Enjoying it is absolutely critical, but then that sort of maturity of understanding that you hold a significant level of risk.
Thank you. Anyone wish to add anything to that? Helena, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. So I completely agree with the Chief Constable's comments. Enjoyment is absolutely key. For me, I get that enjoyment through the variety that I've had in the different assignments I've had throughout my career, the challenges that's brought, and a sense of personal development as I've gone along the journey. I've never been in a position where I felt like I'm sort of stuck in a rut and going through the same thing day after day. Every day is different. Every day is new, and very much as Chief Constable explained, having that sense of purpose and understanding the bigger picture about what it's all for and what our place is in the world is really important and really motivating for me. Interestingly, in terms of stress, with life, as life has developed, and as I've had more strings attached through family and children, it's balancing that dynamic of how you match your career ambitions and aspirations against the responsibilities and commitments you have to your family. I've been really lucky, I think, in being able to navigate that path thus far, and I'm really pleased to see in the Air Force and in Defence increasing avenues which take into account both male and female parents and carers being able to navigate a sensible work-life balance at times in their lives, which enable them to have a more longer lasting career. And I think that's really encouraging as we move forward. And I think it echoes some of the points that were said earlier, not only about the workplace and the nature of the job, but the setup that we have today, the constraints we have today, are not necessarily the straight constraints we'll have to operate in tomorrow. And I think it's a responsibility of all of us to keep pushing that door open for that positive change.
I think so. Can I just add two things on that? I completely agree with everything you said. I think you also need skills to be able to compartmentalize. Bad things happen sometimes. Certainly the job, I've seen and done some things that you don't want to ponder on. You kind of just need to compartmentalize it and don't dwell on it. And then the old frozen thing, just let it go. Sometimes we all have failures. We all do things, see things. It might not be to do with your work. It might be being involved in an RTA, and sometimes you just need to say, yeah, that happened, and let it go. And I think it's a traditional female trait in kind of those silos that we tend to overthink and overanalyze and self-judge, and just don't. Learn and move on.
Brilliant advice. Eve, Helen, anything you want to add? Or
so I think for me it's the importance of work-life balance and having interests and activities outside of the workplace, and not feeling as a woman that you have to be present all the time, that you have to work long hours in order to climb that career ladder. You can be as efficient and effective in a normal working day. And I think really for me, it is all about work should be enjoyable. If you're stressed at work, you're not effective. So, take that time, step away, organize your work, get your work done, but for goodness sake, have a work-life balance. I think that's the most important thing I can contribute.
From my perspective as well, I'd say it's also about remembering you're not on your own, because you're part of a team, you have work colleagues, you have line managers, you have people that work for you. And actually, when we're working towards some of these goals, whether they're stressful or not, we lean on each other, and we work well as a team. And certainly in our organisation, we have the opportunity to do lots of development in terms of team building and the personal development on the soft skills sides of things that do enable us to work better as teams. And we're not on our own at the end of the day. And that's the other point, isn't it? Is to remember we have some amazing colleagues, certainly in my area, that I couldn't do it without them. Eve's one of them. And yeah.
I mean, you all talked, didn't you, about the value of role models that you've had going through. And there's a question in the chat that actually asks how well represented women are in your careers, and whether you've noticed a change over time in the number of women applying for similar roles, and whether you think there's any particular challenges for women wanting to join, today. If you would like to kick us off with that one.
The army is sorry, do you want to go?
No, it's fine, go on.
The army is still quite unrepresented, somewhere between 8 and 12% female, depending on the different CAC badges. So if you join the administration corps, it's quite high. If you join the medical corps, it's quite high, sort of over 50%. But in all signals, which is my corps, it's about 9%. And actually, if you add that to technical, it gets even lower. So because it's a double whammy, because there's less people in technology and then there's less people in the army. And and that stayed pretty stagnant, to be honest. It hasn't massively increased. It's probably crept up, but it's not increased sort of tenfold. And I don't think that's a reflection necessarily on the army as much as the UK culture. It's still seen as a boy thing rather than a girl thing. And so there's lots of our infantry. Many roles are all open to women now, but that's only recent. So the infantry type roles. So in terms of role models, I've never worked for a woman before I joined Deloitte. So there's quite a long time where I never actually worked for a female. Certainly not. And I didn't even have anybody senior to me who was an army female or an RAF or a Navy for that matter either. So I've always been at the top of that glass ceiling. But but role models can be men as well, right? So I think as long as you take that view, and then you just, the game has changed so much, and I reflect on 30 years of progress, and it's just going to keep going.
I think just to echo that from Sarah, it's the he for she, which is a really strong campaign. I think recognising the majority have to be the champions. So in policing, very different from when I joined. So we're on about 33% nationally. We've got a massive recruitment drive at the moment, around 20,000 new officers. 40% of those joining in West Mercia are female now, which still isn't enough. I'm asking why not 50%, why not more? So as the first female chief constable of West Mercia, which makes me incredibly proud, I've introduced the false value of inclusion. And my job is around systematically breaking down all of those barriers, anything that's getting in the way of us to be the most inclusive organisation. And I'm incredibly proud that after just 14 months, we've got a firearms course going on at the moment. So for police officers who want to carry firearms, and it's a 50-50 split of male and female, and it's the first time that's ever been achieved. So making progress, not quickly enough, but moving in the right direction.
Would anyone else like to add anything, or?
I think only in as much I'd echo what Sarah said about the split of male and female in technical roles. I recently did some management information, and 33% of our organisation within defence are female, and I thought, right, okay. But when I broke that down further, only 9% were in those technical cybersecurity roles. So I do think we've got a long way to go in terms of bringing women into those more technical roles, and making them feel that they want to be part of what I think traditionally has been considered to be more male-orientated roles in science and technology.
I think the latest figures was something like 20 to 24% women in cyber, which is improved to what it was a few years ago. But I think that goes back to that whole push on, inclusion, the whole diversity agenda. The likes of the National Cybersecurity Centre have been working with the schools. I mean, they're even their latest program, I think, is called Cyber Sprinters, where they're trying to reach out even to the 7 to 10-year-olds, which is fantastic because they're getting in at the really young age. And like Eve said, so many of the youngsters they tended to be the boys that were more interested in the tech side. Well, actually now I think girls are the opportunities of being there now. They're reaching out to inspire girls to get more involved because the opportunities are there, and why shouldn't we embrace getting involved with this side of things, recognizing there's so many different diverse roles within cyber as well. But yeah, we need to keep pushing the agenda for sure.
Wing Commander?
Yeah, so just to add to that, I mean, I think in terms of the Air Force figures, I think we're at pretty much the same as the Army, about 8 to 12%, again, depending on which specialisation you join. Personnel support tends to be a lot more evenly balanced, whereas some of the technical fields much less so, and that's, I guess, inevitable given the low number of low percentage of women in engineering nationally. But I heard a phrase that resonated with me a few months back, and that was gender denial. And I think it's fair to say that I'm guilty of that through the early parts of my career. I didn't want gender to be a blocker, and so I didn't hang my hat on it. Particularly now, a few years of my career under my belt, and in a position of increasing responsibility, I think it's important to try and encourage people to bring their true selves to work and not to be in gender denial, in order to then make it very clear that you don't have to abandon part of who you are in order to achieve your career goals. So yeah, that's something I thought might be worth sharing at this point.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that feels like a great leap forward, actually, doesn't it? That you don't, if you want to lead, you don't have to lead like a man. You can lead like you are, whoever you are. And in fact, just while you've all been inspiring us, you might be interested to see or hear a comment in the chat. Not a question, but a comment. I am absolutely in awe of all of your achievements, and it makes me believe in my own future. Thank you for being trailblazers. So there you go. Good, valuable work done tonight, hopefully in bringing girls and young women into the industry. Lots of questions. I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. Question around subject choice. So varying opinions on mathematics and its role in your careers, but do you think now, knowing what you know now, that a university degree in computer science would actually help in getting you into that role maybe more quickly or as a postgrad?
I think it probably would help, but I wouldn't say it's the only route. And I think that it's recognizing actually that there's a number of different ways into cyber for sure. I mean, I got my postgraduate, in 2012, I think it was, and didn't go to university, but it was a different thing, I guess, back in my day. But if you've got the interest and the wherewithal for going to university, then great. But it's not the only way. I think it's probably the point from me, I guess.
I think we've just taken in a new cohort of graduates onto a postgraduate programme, and I think looking at the range of degrees that these graduates possess, most of them are STEM subjects. One of our graduates has a computer science degree. The others have maths or physics or astrophysics, but they are all science-based subjects. And I think someone with a science-based background may have, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, but I will say seem to have greater aptitude for cybersecurity. But as Helen said, cybersecurity encompasses a whole range of careers. And so it's not to say that someone with a less technical background wouldn't really succeed in a cyber risk management role, which is less technical and more analytical. And so I do think that the most important thing about cybersecurity, particularly when we're looking at the more technical roles such as penetration testing and vulnerability analysis, yes, certainly the technical qualifications are really helpful, but I wouldn't preclude anyone with an aptitude for entering the profession. I really wouldn't.
And for example, psychology. Psychology is a great one as a basis for many things in business. It's about why we do the things we do in business, but it's also quite valuable in cyber because there's a whole, behaviors side of cyber of why people do what they do in cyber that is really, really interesting. And we in our team, we have a whole team that drive the cyber behaviors side of things, and they are busy day in and day out trying to analyze why our users do what they do, and then trying to improve the way we deliver our systems to make it less challenging, I guess, for the user in what we deliver. But yeah, so psychology as well is also a good one.
So in the cyberspace profession, which is what I belong to, we're evolving away from the traditional engineering requirements for engineer officers, which required you to have a registered engineering degree, and really broadening that out to a range of different science and STEM related subjects. So I think there's no need to be necessarily too specific and too niche in terms of limiting sort of degree choices, unless it's something that really sort of appeals to you. But I completely agree with the different range of skills, particularly within cyber. And for my master's degree, I was taught the defensive cyber module by somebody who was a doctor of sociology. And she was a leader in her field on that basis. But more broadly within the military construct, as I've gone from more technical roles through to more command and managerial roles, actually the range of applicable subjects is equally diversified. And I feel like I would be equally well placed at this juncture if I had a background in psychology, sociology, management, geopolitics, economics. And I think it speaks to the broader point of diversity. And I know we talk a lot in terms of demographic diversity, but encouraging that diversity of thought and having people with all different kinds of academic backgrounds that can come around a table and bring their unique perspectives, I think really adds a huge amount of strength in the defence field, and is something that should be encouraged.
If I could just relate that a little bit to software development, which is kind of more my field, the whole user interface element of that, the whole kind of user centricity is an art form. And we often find that those with an arts background are much able to visualize what that might look like, understand that human machine teaming interface. So again, arts, humanities. I work with a chap at the moment who is a humanities background, sort of English graduate. He's able to write things that really make things come to life, so he can translate technology into business speak to make senior leaders or users really understand, whereas I'm still writing a technical document, because he's got that ability to translate that into more of a journalistic, easier consumption read. So this diverse thinking, diverse teams just make much stronger outcomes. So my view is, if it floats your boat and you love it, do it. Your computer science degree, and yes, it will probably accelerate you for the first 3 to 4 years, because you'll just have that knowledge, but I don't think it's necessarily essential in the long run.
So we've had a question from a parent, and I can sort of see where this one might have come from. So much of the discussions include the expertise that girls and boys now have with tech. My question relates to digital footprints. You were all successful women who wouldn't necessarily have had to deal with a digital footprint from your teenage years. What depth of research do the MOD, police or government do into things like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, etc.? What can girls do to maximise their opportunities while still enjoying their youth? If anyone wants to pick up on that. Pippa, I think you're on mute.
Apologies, I'm happy to pick up on that. Nobody could have missed the challenges facing policing nationally at the moment, specifically in the Met around professional standards, and I think it's fair to say that vetting on joining policing is undergoing significant changes, and that will include going right back through social media history, whereas at the moment it's not as well. There's social media checks, but not as comprehensive as they will be. I suppose my sons are 20 and 21. I'm fortunate that I'm friends with them on all the social media platforms, so I get to see what they post. And I think it's just that healthy, not just letting yourself get tagged into anything, making sure people ask permission, you give permission before you're tagged into something, and really simple steps like that people can put in place to protect themselves. Not to inhibit enjoyment, and thinking about the people on the line going to university shortly. It's not about being fun sponges, but it's just being a little bit aware of your own security, but then also future careers.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything to add on that?
I'll just put it into context. If you're filling in an ETSA to go to America for your visa, you have to put in your Twitter handle, your Facebook handle. So actually, this isn't just about future employment; it's also potentially about future international travel. In the army, we used to have a zero drugs policy before joining the army. That's been relaxed a bit, so that if you have tried it at university, that won't necessarily bar you. And ditto with things like tattoos. We used to be no tattoo policy. So there is a kind of a more acceptance of what society, being a reflection of society, as opposed to necessarily dictating to traditions from 1920s. But I've got a 12-year-old who's foraying into social media now, and I say quite often, when you're a High Court judge, what photographs do you want circulating? Not that you'll be a High Court judge, but and actually that resonates. I do think the generation that 13, 16 now, they've had so much more education about cyber online and cyber awareness and safe online, and I think it's a generation just ahead of them. I think are the ones that are going to have full self out about this, because social media was happening and there weren't the same controls or knowledge. But I think your best defense is each other, as peers. Look out at your friends, and just self-police it. Sorry, Pepper, but just policing word. But I think you are each other's best defense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think, as you say, it's something that most of the young people on the call tonight will be all too aware of already. It is the sort of people a few years perhaps ahead of them. So I guess the answer really is it does matter, but it matters for all aspects of life, not just going into defence or national security. Thank you. Question in the chat. Helen touched on the importance of soft skills. How did you develop your own leadership and management style, and what made you feel safe in what are often male-dominated environments?
That's a hard one. Yeah, it's quite,
because it's come from your quote. So
yes, I know. Oh, pressure. Yeah, it is a hard one, that, but I think, and it's interesting actually that Gemma put in the comment, in the side of the comment there, someone at GCHQ told her once that they really want girls in cyber because they approach things in a different way. And I do think that women in general have a kind of a different approach to the way we do soft skills. I just think it's we've just got a different way. Not that it's the right way or the wrong way, but we have a different way of engaging with people sometimes that we find it easier to talk and perhaps communicate, be a bit more open. Men can sometimes be a bit of a closed book, can't they? And especially as the girls, when we get together and we're having a bit of fun and things like that, we open up and we're relaxed. And I don't know, I'd just say for myself, it's about, I don't know, bringing yourself to work, being yourself, being able to communicate, not being frightened of saying things like Eve touched on earlier. You know, this is it's not about listening to people who say you can't do things. It's about challenging and just being confident, I guess, that actually you're as good as anybody else, whether they're male or female. But yeah, take opportunity with developing those soft skills as well. You know, when you have your team meetings, you have your one-to-ones, it's about being that open book and having those kind of open conversations with people so that you can get inside people's heads a little bit, so you can understand them and support them, because, you know, that's a challenge that we all face when we come to work, because everybody's got different and diverse needs. So yeah, I'd just say that, really, to be honest.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
I think it's an awesome question, Ben. Well done. I mean, we've heard tonight in terms of different backgrounds coming, you know, whether an academic background or you know where people came from. But, you know, I remember when I first got selected onto the High Potential Scheme, and I went for my first leadership and self-development, and my feedback at the end of the week, I was there waiting, tell me how did I do it? And they were like, you're really nice. And for me, that was like, oh, you know, and actually, you know, you can only be yourself in leadership, and being nice is okay. And you can only be your authentic self, and that's another thing I learned from Dame Lynn Owens, was she's totally herself. She's consistent. You know, you can't bring this artificial being to work because you're at work for you know, such a large proportion of your time. But having said that, you can underpin it and you can develop yourself. You know, there's a TED Talk for everything. I subscribe to Harvard Business Review even now, you know, dealing with difficult conversations, things like that. I get a daily alert. So, you know, you be your true self, but you can never stop improving yourself. Always keep developing yourself. And I think that's how you continue to develop as you go through your career.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that that theme of constant change and development. I mean, I still think I'm very much changing my leadership management style as I move through different stages in my career. And up until quite recently, my training, my education background has been focused on sort of more classical topics and technical topics. It's only quite recently that I've actually invested that specific time in things like thinking about emotional intelligence, human performance, coaching and mentoring as specific topics in their own right. And that's fundamentally changed my way of thinking about my role as a commander and as somebody sort of in charge of a training establishment. And so I think whilst we talk about the technology world changing rapidly, I think the culture that we're leading and managing in equally changes really fast. As new generations come through with new expectations and new backgrounds. So yeah, I think it's important to constantly develop your leadership and management style. But I think within the technical remit, there is a really good get out in terms of overcoming any nerves or points of difference around the team, and that is that you're focused on trying to solve a particular problem set. And the team is united in trying to solve that problem set. And so if that's the focus of the conversation, I think really it overrules any of those other sort of superficial constraints about your points of difference around the table. So I think there's a lot to be taken in terms of the security that brings when you're bringing your professional self.
I have to admit that when I started my army journey, I tried to lead in the same way that was the kind of classic army officer leadership, you know, stand in front, run faster, be better, be stronger, be brighter. And had a couple of epiphanies. One was, and Helen, you dropped off this, I no longer had to dress in suits. I could wear a dress and that was fine. You know, I could wear a smart dress and that's good. And actually that was hugely empowering to, you know, just dress as a woman rather than dress as a woman, dress as a man. By wearing suits and blouses rather than, you know, I didn't go as far as a tie, but I always used to kind of feel like I had to wear a suit. The other thing is I discovered a concept, and I just compared my leadership style to so many leadership styles and mantras and doctrines over the years, and they weren't fitting, they didn't feel comfortable. And I kind of started reading about something called servant leadership in the last sort of 5 or 6 years, which resonated massively. And that absolutely played to the way I lead, is that you don't lead, you're there to empower your people that are around you, the teams around you, not just the peers, your hierarchy. You're there to enable them to do their job and to get their outputs. So as a servant leadership, you're there is to take away their blockers, empower them to get on with their job. And for me, that was just kind of quite breathtaking, really. To say, well, like, that's how I lead, and that's the thing. That's okay. I can lead like that. So sometimes you don't just need to find the style that resonates. But to Helena's point, sometimes you just have to turn it on and start shouting.
Eve, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. The only thing I would like to add to that, because everything that Sarah's just said resonates with me, is the most powerful thing I ever learnt, I think, was when I had a coach who said, you tend to take feedback defensively. What I'm giving to you is a gift. And I reflected on that and I thought, you're absolutely right. You know, what you're trying to do is to make me see how I can be a better manager, a better leader by playing back to me how I could do things differently. And I think accepting that and embracing it and reflecting upon it, not negatively and defensively, but looking at it as a way of improving my own leadership style. I think that was a really valuable lesson. It was a bit of a light bulb moment for me, because none of us liked feedback that we perceived to be negative, but actually it's incredibly helpful, and I think it helped me on my leadership journey.
Thank you. I think we've got time for just one more question, and I've been saving this one to the end, although it popped into the chat quite early doors. So the question is, if you could sit down and talk to your younger self just before they sat their A-levels, or, you know, when they were 16, 17, what advice would you give, and why? I don't know if everyone's happy to answer that. What advice and why would you give that advice to your younger self? And I don't know if anyone's happy to start off or wants a bit more thinking time. Go on, Eve.
I think be confident in your decision making and believe in yourself. Yeah, I think, you know, there are plenty of naysayers out there and doubters who say, well, should you be doing that? Do you think you could manage that? And particularly, and you know, I'll just reflect on when I went back to university with a young child in, you know, and I had to do a higher degree with a child, and people think, you know, you're doing too much, you know, you're taking on too. No, I can do this. I believe in myself. And I think that's the most important thing. You know, when I was younger, 18 years old, 17, 18 years old, making those choices, I would like to have had someone say, just believe in yourself and follow your goals, because you can achieve. Yeah, I think that's what I would say to myself at that age.
Brilliant. Thank you, Eve. Who would like to go next?
I have a very flippant answer, which is invest in a really good sports bra. I wish I'd done that really early. Because by this age you wish you had, right? They didn't exist in quite the way they do now, so you know, but and clearly I would say, you know, just get on, suck it up and do your maths A-level, is what I would say to myself at that point. Just build your foundations for the future, and those foundations can build multiple houses. So don't think you have to architect your house now, but just concentrate on building foundations, making connections, and start growing a network early. Networking is incredibly powerful, so do that early. So I will be reaching out after this to try and get a beer with Pippa, even Helen, I know it already. I've worked together in the past very briefly, and I need to reconnect with her. So,
yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing. I've been a couple of other people said they are. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. And I think there's one thing I'd say, because my daughter has not long since come out of the A-levels and the education, but I know when she was going into choosing her A-levels, she was so stressed because she just was looking at the list and going, I want to do A-levels, but I don't know what to do. And it was only through having lots of conversations, in the end, she just went for the ones that she felt really interested her. So it wasn't about picking certain subjects to get her to a point in her life. It was about doing subjects that she enjoyed. And I think that's probably, you know, something that when I look back on mine, I wish I'd done subjects that I'd enjoyed more or thought I might enjoy, rather than perhaps my dad saying, well, do you know what, you probably should go down this route or whatever. But actually everyone's individual, and you just have to go with your gut feeling, don't you, sometimes, and just do what is right for you and your interests, because that's what's going to take you forward in life, and that's what you're going to enjoy.
I think mine would be don't compare yourself to other people, and also care less what other people think. Because everyone, look at, you've got 5 women here, all very different careers. Every person's career path is different, and so you forge your own path. And I think that's probably the advice that I'd have given to myself earlier in life.
Helena?
So I've been mulling this over, because I have to confess to having probably a large degree of arrogance at that age. I knew what I wanted. I was confident in going and doing it, and I'd achieved that because I'd immersed myself as best I could at that stage in the environment, and I knew I felt at home. I felt a sense of belonging, and I didn't have any qualms about going out and grabbing it. So the thing that I would say to extrapolate that to those on the call is that that I would like you to think that in terms of careers in defence or whatever career you choose to pursue, they need you. We need you. We need you to be your best you and to bring that to the party, because the future is yours, it's not ours. So please come along and bring your very, very best self.
What a brilliant way to finish. And I am sure that, tonight there will be people on the call for whom this has been a definitive moment, and they will remember the things that you said and the way that you said them. I'm jealous that you're all going to go out for a pint together. I think we'd all agree, and I've just had a message from Gemma Parish, who I must say thank you to, because without Gemma these things wouldn't happen. And she's just sent me a message saying, what an amazing group of women. I'm completely humbled. And I think that expresses how we all feel. You must be so busy. You're doing a million and one things, and yet you've given of your time tonight to inspire us all. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone when I say a heartfelt thank you. It has been really inspirational. I think we will all sleep more soundly tonight, knowing that national defence and security is in the hands of such brilliant, formidable, funny, inspiring, fabulous women. Thank you so very much for joining us. And I hope that our paths will cross again someday. And have a lovely evening to everybody. Thank you for coming. Good night.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.